The best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live. 5 Live Daily with Adrian Childs.
It's nearly 25 to 11. At the end of last year, Emma Barnett spoke to a woman who'd lost £300,000, having fallen in love with a fraudster. Since 2013, 12,000 people have told police they were duped out of money after they'd fallen in love with someone, losing over £100 million between them. Today, we're speaking to a woman with an extraordinary story of romance fraud. Carolyn Woods claimed she lost £850,000 after a relationship with a man who variously claimed to be a banker and MI6 agent. The man in question, Mark Acklom, has since disappeared and is the subject of a European arrest warrant. It's an extraordinary story. Carolyn's very brave to tell it. Well, here's the whole story, really. It's how she first encountered the man.
The first time I met him, I was working in a shop in Tetbury. It was at the end of the day, about 5 o'clock, and the bell pinged on the door. I looked up and there he was. And I have to say that instantly he was quite an arresting figure standing in the doorway of the shop. He didn't look like your average sort of Cotswold male customer. And in fact, lone male customers were generally few and far between. But yes, that was the first time I set eyes on him, just about 5 years ago.
So you chatted to him and he told you what story about himself then?
Well, he came in, he said hello, he was very attentive, making a lot of eye contact, I do remember that, and he said that he had noticed a jacket in the window, as we sold some very nice menswear, and he wondered if I had it in his size. And from there on, he just was extremely chatty, quite entertaining, a little bit flirtatious, and he was in the shop for about half an hour before I told him I had to shut up shop, and he left.
But before long, you'd kind of fallen for him. You'd exchanged numbers, or you'd given him your number, I think.
Well, actually, just before he left the shop, he asked me for my telephone number, and I gave it to him. And within, I would say, about a minute of leaving the shop, I received the first of a bombardment of text messages that I was to receive that evening.
And at this stage, what lies had he told you? His name wasn't his name for a start, was it? His
name wasn't his name. He told me his name was Mark. I couldn't actually remember at the time what he'd said his surname was. So he told me that. He confirmed later on, a few days later on, that it was Conway, but of course that was a lie. He told me that he was 46 years old. In fact, he was 38 years old. He told me that he was single, and of course I later discovered that he was married with 2 children. In fact, he's got 2 children from a previous marriage as well. But he was actually living in Bath at that time with his wife and 2 young children.
So how did the relationship develop then, and how did his story develop? When did the MI6 lie come into it?
I can't remember exactly the date, but it was pretty soon after I first met him. The day after I met him, we met for a drink in the evening, and we sat and chatted for about 2 hours. He was extremely easy to talk to, very entertaining, and during the course of that evening, he told me quite a lot about his family, much of it fabricated, some of it I now know it was true. So he mixed sort of fact and fantasy. He rather chillingly, in retrospect, told me on that first date that there was something that he had to confide in me, and I said, well, what's that? And he said, I'm not normal. At the time, I took that to be actually a positive thing, because he certainly was not in the mould of people that I had come across sort of generally since moving to the country there. And I just found him very exciting. But of course, I think that he had the whole thing pre-planned, and I think he actually enjoyed, putting these little bits of information in front of me that seemed innocent or entertaining, but in fact, in retrospect, were quite chilling.
Just going back a bit, when you say pre-planned, had he identified you as a target somehow, having heard about you or something, or was he walking past the shop and thought, aye, I'll try my luck here?
My view on this is that he had identified me as a target, and
what commended you as a target, do you think?
well, I think that he found out. My suspicion is that he found out, probably from an estate agent, a local estate agent, that I had a substantial amount of money in the bank, because I'd sold my house and I was looking in the area to buy, and it was known that I was a cash buyer. So that's the sort of way that I think he might have found out about me, because on the outside, superficially, I was living in a very small rented cottage. I was driving a 10-year-old Ford KA. And I was working in a shop, so nothing really on the surface to indicate that I had that sort of wealth.
But you had a kind of a war chest because you'd sold a house, basically.
I'd sold my house, yes.
So when did he make the first attempts to get his hands on some of that money?
Well, he was, again, when I look back, he was really quite clever, because he did end up buying a jacket from the shop, not on that first evening, but subsequently. But he didn't have quite enough money. He wanted to pay in cash, and he was about £30 short. So I said, well, don't worry, because we were in a relationship by this time. I said, I'll put in the rest of the money and you can pay me back. And a while later, he hadn't paid me back, and I reminded him about this, and he made a big song and dance about how, of course, didn't I trust him? Of course he was going to pay me back, and he couldn't believe that anybody would make such a fuss about such a paltry sum. And if I was going to be with him, I was going to have to learn how to spend money. And he made me feel so terrible. And then actually apparently came hours out of his way that very night to give me the £30 because I'd been so upset about not having been repaid. He made me feel terrible and mean, and I can't stand meanness in people. And I think he did that so that, when he soon after was on the telephone, apparently talking to somebody about a cash flow problem, and that was a conversation that I overheard, which I'm sure was staged for my benefit. Of course, I jumped in and said, well, I can help you out, because also I knew that the money was supposedly for renovations on a lovely property that he was buying for us to live in.
So I'm just trying to get at his techniques by way of a warning to the rest of us,
yes.
Really, to men and women. So, number one, made a song and dance over that 30 quid, just testing you out, making you feel a bit guilty about it yourself. So start with a small sum. And then key to it now is that he didn't come to you saying, I've got cash flow problems. He let you overhear a conversation with him talking about his cash flow problems. So let you sort of initiate it in a way.
That's right, yes.
So what kind of sums are we talking about now?
Well, the initial sum that he was talking about was I think it was about £26,000. And I said that I could lend him £26,000. But very soon after that, he started to ask if I could lend him more. And actually, more than ask, he seemed to sort of assume that I could lend him more. And it was, when I look back, it was as though I was completely under his spell. And I don't know how people get into the minds of other people, but I think he sort of certainly got into my mind. And I didn't really question after that, his motives. I just trusted him absolutely. And whenever I saw him, I was absolutely convinced that, I felt in love. I was in love with him. I wasn't in love with Mark Conway, but I was in love with his, this persona, and this character that he created. And I did trust him absolutely. And I was quite sure I'd, met the most honourable person that you could ever wish to meet.
But I don't know how to put this, but you look and sound like the kind of woman who can smell somebody like him coming a mile off, who can tell a wise guy when they see one. So what was it about him, though? I mean, are you any the wiser, this electricity around him? He's not particularly good looking, is he? Or I don't know, what was it?
No, he's not. I mean, I found him good looking. I mean, he does look very different. If you look at the various pictures that have appeared in the press, he can look very different. And more recent pictures, he seems a lot thinner and certainly not at all attractive. But when I met him, I did find him attractive. He actually also said about himself that he said he was never the most attractive man in the room, but he always got noticed. And I think that sums him up quite well. He also did tell me on that first date that I had with him that he could read people like books, and that within 10 minutes he knew more about what made a person tick than they knew themselves. And I think he has got a way of doing that. I can't explain it. I think you'd have to ask someone like Derren Brown, who maybe, or a psychologist who may know more about that. But he certainly knows how to hook people and reel them in.
If your alarm bells weren't ringing, then surely your friends' alarm bells must have been ringing. Was anybody counselling caution with this man who was taking money off you, or had you not told your friends he was borrowing money from you?
I hadn't told anybody that he was borrowing money from me, and neither had I told anybody about his supposed MI6 connection, which I, by that stage, knew about. He'd confided in me, but of course he told me that I mustn't talk about anything. He told me right at the very first meeting that it would be 18 months before he could be in a proper full-time relationship because of work commitments, and that it would be a very difficult time. He subsequently told me that MI6 would do everything they possibly could to destroy us, and he made me generally extremely secretive and very nervous, and he was always pointing out, security cameras, this kind of thing, and suspicious looking people on the street, telling me that his life was in danger, this kind of thing. Of course I did tell people initially that I'd met this amazing guy, and some were very happy for me, but there certainly were a couple of people who were very vociferous in their warnings against him, and my brother actually said to me that, and my sister-in-law said that they were sure he was a con man. I'm afraid my reaction to that at the time was, well, why couldn't they just be happy for me? And what a ridiculous thing. I think also I was lulled into a false sense of security by my surroundings. Tetbury is a very idyllic little Cotswold town. And I'd actually looked at the crime figures before I moved there. There's very little crime there. And I just thought how ridiculous. And I remember thinking nothing bad could happen in a place like this. Well, of course, that is a naive thought, because trouble can travel anywhere.
This is something like out of Midsummer Murders, isn't it? It's like, if this was a plot line in that, you'd be thinking, oh, here they go again. I mean, how unlikely is this? But, it did happen to you. Tell us about the MI6 incident when he took you to the headquarters. Now, assuming he's not an MI6 operative, which we have to assume he's not.
Yeah, I'm sure
he took a gamble. He took a gamble there, didn't he? Because he got you to drop him off there.
I don't know how he did this. And again, you talk about Midsummer Murders. I actually said to people, this is like something out of James Bond, because that's much more how it felt. I was in London with him on this occasion, and in fact, he had a driver, so neither of us were driving. And in the afternoon, he said to me that he had been called in to see his boss at MI6, and his driver, who was also his accomplice, drove us. We went over Vauxhall Bridge. There was the MI6 building, and we drove round the far side of the building, and then sort of into a side street. And I can't remember exactly where we went, but we were certainly in the vicinity of the MI6 building, and I believed that he was going in through a back entrance to see his boss. He got out of the car, I was left with the driver in the car, and I saw him walk into what looked like an underground car park past two armed guards. There were two men wearing flak jackets and holding what looked like machine guns. So I was absolutely convinced that he had gone into the MI6 building. I have been told since that they don't have armed guards at MI6, but how anybody got anywhere near the MI6 building, even with a toy gun, I don't know. And who those people were, I have no idea.
OK, so by now, he's had almost £1 million from you. When did this start to unravel? Did he just suddenly vanish?
Well, at the end of 2012, he did indeed vanish. Now, I believed at that time, my life was descending into hell. I had no money left. I was living in a house that I believed he owned, but I was paying all the bills on the house because quite apart from his work commitments and wishing to protect his identity, he had told me that he had a brain tumour. He'd been diagnosed with a brain tumour and that he was going to have surgery. This was probably about the autumn of 2012. And indeed, I did see him at the hospital, not actually in a hospital bed, and he never gave me the name of his consultant because he said MI6, wouldn't allow me to go and see him. But he said if I came to the hospital and parked by the neuroradiology unit, he would find a way to come out and see me. And indeed he did, and his head was all bandaged up. There was apparently a little drain coming out of his head. And again, this is another one of his charades, I'm sure. So, he managed to convince me that he was an MI6 agent. He then subsequently convinced me that he had brain surgery. And then at the end of 2012, he told me that he was going to the Royal Free Hospital in London to have a second opinion about another operation that he now said it was required. And then I was told that MI6 had kidnapped him and wanted him to go back into service in Syria and finish his mission. Seemed rather strange, if he'd just had brain surgery. But when I said that, he said, "Well, of course, really, they just want to do me in." And then he did sort of. Well, I believed he went back to Syria. Of course, this is not true. I now know this. None of this is true. And I was told that he told me that he had been badly wounded and he was now in a military hospital in Athens. That was at the beginning of 2013.
And were you believing anything he said at this stage, or just wanting to? Or what?
I was believing it. Yeah, I was believing it. I was so engrossed in the whole story, and he had convinced me about the MI6 connection. And he had convinced me that he'd had this brain tumour. So actually, where there were discrepancies or where he didn't seem to be thinking logically or making sound decisions, I put that down to the fact that he'd had brain surgery, and this was an effect of the brain surgery.
I mean, he'd covered all bases. I mean, I'm not thinking you're an idiot, by the way. I'm thinking, but for the grace of God go I. If I were unfortunate enough to have someone as skilled trying to con me. So at what time did you realise, I've got to go to the police here?
I'd always said to him that would wait 18 months for him. Whatever happened, I would wait 18 months. So I feel also I was, qualities in my character that I would normally regard as strengths actually became my weakness because he used them against me. So loyalty, for example, and sticking to my word. So in May of 2013, I now believed that he was in Italy, that he'd managed to escape, so to speak, his MI6 handlers. He was in Italy on the run, trying to do a deal with the Italian government. And we were trying to arrange to meet up. Well, he kept saying he was going to get air tickets to fly me to wherever he was, and they never materialised. And then one day he was talking about perhaps we could meet in Nice, and I said, well, look, I'll get the air ticket. I'll come and meet you. And we arranged to meet the following week. Of course, what happened was I flew off to Nice and he just never showed up. And I had the most horrendous 24 hours there. He was in touch with me every single day, let me say that as well, on the telephone. So he sort of kept his control over me, but it was less than it had been. And incidentally, also, I'd moved out of the bathhouse in January of 2013 because I was so depressed, and also I just couldn't pay the bills anymore. So I was just became distraught. He wanted me then to get on a train and go to Barcelona, and I refused. I said, there's only one place I'm going back, going from here, and that's back to London, which I did. And then he again said he was going to arrange to have me flown out somewhere to meet him. And when this didn't happen, I actually phoned, I contacted a past business associate of his, who I now know was also conned by him, just to see if he could help me or tell me anything. And in fact, he had a lot to tell me. I spoke to him on the phone. This is now mid-June. And we arranged to meet a couple of days later in London. And we met for about 6 hours, and he had actually discovered the true identity of Mark Conway.
So at which point you must have thought, right, I'm going to the police, and they'll saddle up the cavalry, off they'll go, and they'll catch him.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't quite like that.
It wasn't like that. The very next day, I was in the most dreadful state. I was staying with my daughter in London, and we went to Islington Police Station to report the fraud. She said, you've got to go now, and she came with me. And I spoke to the officer at the desk there, and told him the extent of the fraud. And he sort of said, that's a lot of money, chuckle, and said, but we don't take reports of fraud here. You have to report it online to Action Fraud. And he sent me away, and I could barely stand up. And I couldn't believe that I was being sent away like that and asked to make an online report. So, in fact, he gave me a leaflet. I went back to my daughter's flat, and I was in a terrible state. And she persuaded me later that evening that I must make this report, and I just didn't know what to do. So, in fact, I phoned the Action Fraud helpline and spoke to somebody there. But, that sort of was the start of a sort of farcical 6 weeks of inaction and toing and froing, during which time I was told that I should have reported the crime initially to the police because it was so serious, and that, of course, was exactly what I tried to do. And then, because I had no fixed address, there were 3 police forces. I was sort of, lobbed around from one to the other. No one wanted to take it on or said they could take it on. And eventually, after about, it was nearly 2 months, we were well into August now, it was assigned to Avon and Somerset Police, but to a police officer who was on holiday.
So, as it stands at the moment, we've got to be careful what we can say.
Right.
But nobody knows where he is. He's thought to be somewhere in Spain.
Nobody knows where he is, and I have no idea where he's thought to be or where he may be.
And you are no closer to getting your 850,000 quid back or any part of it?
I think right at the beginning of this, I was told that I would probably never get my money back. And really, I've had an agonising 3.5 years of frustration trying to get some action. I was very pleased when in June 2015, I actually told the police that I believed Mark Acklom was in prison in Spain, and I gave them evidence then the following month that he was. So I told them that, and he was a sitting duck in prison, but unfortunately, although they talked about getting a European arrest warrant, they did eventually get one, but by that time, that wasn't until a year later. And of course, he had been released from prison in February last year. So that sent me into an absolute nosedive of depression. And I've been extremely frustrated because, he was there in prison, and the thought that he has got away and he's out there, it is just almost too much for me to bear.
OK, well, Carolyn, keep in touch with us, and I hope you get some kind of resolution. It's an extraordinary story. And
Thank you.
Carolyn Woods, allegedly defrauded out of £850,000 by one Mark Acklom. He's currently believed to be in Spain, and a European arrest warrant has been issued for him. Sky News managed to speak to him last year about Carolyn's claims. He described them as nonsense, although he later wrote to the crime correspondent saying he didn't really understand what she was saying about him. So make of that what you will. Detective Inspector Adam Bunting from Avon and Somerset Police says the force is working with the National Crime Agency and Crime Stoppers to try and capture Acklom, and he's currently one of the 10 most wanted British fugitives in Spain. In a statement, the Detective Inspector added, "We're aware of some of the concerns the victim has relating to the early stages of the investigation, but I'd like to reassure her and the public that we're doing everything we can to find Acklom and bring him back to this country. Anyone with information about Mark Acklom's whereabouts is urged to get in touch with either the police or Crime Stoppers," and we'll come back to this later in the show. We'll be talking to Steve Proffitt from Action Fraud, the City of London Police Unit, which handles the reporting of fraud across the UK. And we'll hear again from David. He called this show last month telling us about an Albanian woman who he'd sent £100,000 to already. Wasn't sure whether to stop. He's been receiving help. She's just asked him for some more money and he doesn't know what to do. Coming up in the next hour, we'll discuss a call from MPs and peers that immigrants should be expected to learn English before coming to Britain. And now we have a new ambassador to the EU after Sir Ivan Rogers resigned. We'll find out more about the man now holding what some would see as a somewhat poisoned chalice, playing the key civil servant role in the UK's Brexit talks. And also how using one of those Cody box things could land you in trouble with the law.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live.
It's 11 o'clock on 5 Live. Adrian Childs here with 5 Live Daily.
The top news story on 5 Live this hour. Schools are asked to do more to protect children online.
In sport, Arsenal are hit by an injury to a midfield regular.
If you're out and about this morning, take us with you on your smartphone or tablet.